Yo, you ever think about purpose? What's my purpose, homie?
When I first watched The Bear, I thought Richie was a massive problem. Even when the show told me that he was someone that was deeply troubled and complex, I still couldn't help but not like him all that much. I think it makes a lot of sense. Richie is someone that's antagonistic to Kami's goal of improving their restaurant, so I think not being a fan of Richie is kinda the normal sentiment. I didn't think he was a bad person, but I just didn't think he would be necessary for Kami's purpose. Unsurprisingly, of course, I was wrong, but more importantly, I was wrong in the best possible way. Richie wasn't just cast aside, he was redeemed and made a vital part of the operation. For such a drastic change to his character, I think what impresses me the most is how simple the change really was. His fixing was simply addressing the problems most core to his being and realigning him to a purpose that would fit him. After his arc, I think Richie is absolutely one of the coolest characters in this show, and I have no shame admitting I lived this exact meme through my experience. I believe this character arc is special, so today I want to talk about how the Bear was so brilliant at giving Richie a purpose, how it clears up his misunderstandings, how the redemption arc continues to pay off even after Forks, the validity of him forming those relationships in a week, etc.
Did you just mispronounce etc.?
Richie was a troubled man, and I don't think it's hard to understand why. I mean, his life was going about as well as he could have hoped for around the time of Fisher's. He had a wife with a baby on the way, and his Uncle Jimmy could have potentially set him up with an opportunity to move his life forward. It was quite literally all sunshine and rainbows for him. Since then though, the job opportunity blew up in his face, he got divorced and couldn't spend time with his daughter. That's almost okay though, because he and his best bud Mikey were running the super cool local diner spot called The Beef, but then Mikey died. With everything falling apart around him, he only found solace in the fact that he could feel home at The Beef. So when Kami came back and wanted to change the entire outlook of the restaurant and suddenly buy dystopian butter, it's almost no wonder Richie was opposed to it. There was just too much uncertainty in the new recipes and about how much Kami understood about the general neighborhood or running a restaurant business. There was also definitely an element of Richie grieving Mikey in his own way that was at play at his reluctance to change the restaurant too much. Now that Mikey wasn't here to handle things, it was his responsibility to make sure everything still functioned. Or, well, so he thought anyway. There are a lot of factors that went into Richie being generally antagonistic to Kami's proposed changes, whether that was his pride, his grief for Mikey, or his feeling of losing the only thing he had. But I believe the most important one is the one the show actually covers. Its purpose. Richie had no purpose in the restaurant. He wasn't particularly good at anything in the kitchen, he was just kinda there for the vibes. It was clear how much he understood about the neighborhood and the others in the kitchen, but he didn't really bring anything to the table. The purposelessness is present in season 1, and I believe it's one of the biggest reasons Richie felt so alienated from the whole operation. He couldn't contribute anything to the changes taking place, and in his mind, that kind of person simply just gets cut off. Season 2, however, delves deeper into this exact mindset. Finding that money in the tomato cans made it all so obvious how much everyone else could do to contribute to Kami's dream and how much Richie still just had nothing. He couldn't cook enough to assist, nor did he have the passion for something niche but useful like Marcus. As much as I didn't like Richie throughout season 1, it's obvious just how different season 2 Richie is. Even the simple fact that while all the restaurant preparations are happening, he takes the time to contemplate what exactly he can provide is already something I consider slightly impressive. It's something I never saw coming, and it marked the first big change in his character. Throughout season 2, we see him tackle the idea of trying to contribute until the episode of Forks.
Hey, Forks.
No, I'm Richard.
You're Forks.
Forks is what Richie's character arc was always building towards, and it's obvious when I go back through the show. It's impressive how well the episode shows Richie's mindset slowly changing, both towards the work itself and towards his own life. At the start of the episode, we see a very unenthusiastic and bitter man turning up to a place where he thought he was being gotten rid of. On top of that, he was given the menial task of wiping forks, something he couldn't possibly think was useful to the functioning of the restaurant. Being pushed away from the place he considered his home and then being forced to work a pointless job couldn't have been easy for 8 hours in a day, and yet we see him power through it. Day 3, however, featured 2 important events that marked the start of a change. The first was his conversation with Garrett, and the second was the conversation with Tiff. The conversation with Garrett was actually just a good reminder of what kind of person Richie is. That despite all his faults and how much he didn't want to be there, he could still give the work and the people around him the respect they deserve. This sets up the foundation for the payoff. But before that, he has a conversation with Tiff, where Tiff tells him that she got proposed to and that she said yes. The one hope Richie was holding onto in his life, his relationship with his ex-wife, gets broken. After which, he kinda just had nothing else. Richie at his lowest point, unable to enjoy his life, being kicked while he is down. The second act of the episode is quite obviously the more fun one. It's the part where Richie starts getting more experience at Ever. After being pushed to his lowest point, Richie could finally stop worrying about everything else for just a second and simply exist in the restaurant to learn. Although temporary, he had purpose. He showed just how resourceful he could be with just a little bit of purpose and how well he could learn and absorb key information. It's an actual surprising show of Richie's competence, something I didn't know he had in him. What does he do in the kitchen? Not a lot, but have you seen his waiting skills? That man is a genius. Ever was also just an inspiring place for someone like Richie. It's a restaurant where the entire staff, but especially the waiters, go that extra mile to make the dining experience of the customers better. He also learns how much goes into every dish from every side, whether that's the chef, the pass, or the waiters themselves. The beautiful harmony is what creates the ultimate dining experience, and that is something that didn't just make him understand his purpose, but inspired him. It also definitely helped that he could partake in that very process. He got the opportunity to make a customer's day that much better as a result of his own actions, and that experience was invaluable to the progression of his character. While this was the payoff act though, I actually appreciated how this all came crumbling down for him. Towards the end of his time at Ever, in one of the conversations with Garrett, he realizes that he has to go back to his actual job. A job where he isn't wanted. A job that pushed him away. For all the fun he's had at Ever, he's now going to have to deal with his life in a place that didn't appreciate him or his talents. The show had given him a purpose, but there was still more to fix here. The final act of the episode and the conversation with Chef Terry is where this all comes together. As much as in the first 2 acts in the episode you see Richie get pushed down and get back up, at the end of Act 2 it still makes you question where he is mentally. Whether this is actually a redemption arc or whether Richie is still stuck in his old stubborn ways. On the final day, he wakes up later than usual, goes to work, and is suddenly distant to everyone around there. This is where the conversation with Chef Terry solidifies the whole situation. The important part, of course, was Chef Terry's story of it's never too late to start over, and her reveal that Kami actually did believe in Richie. And just as a side note, the part that he was actually good with people. These were the key factors holding Richie in place. Despite all the learning he did, it would all be of no use if he hadn't understood these key details. After this though, the episode ends and the rest is history. Forks as an episode is a story of a character who has tons of potential that is held back by his own past. Even when that very potential is tapped into, it doesn't change all that much. It's only when he finally leaves his past behind and looks forward that he's able to put the pieces together. Richie being useless was a problem, but there was a very good reason he was the way he was. The episode of Forks fixes both. It gives him purpose and it gives him a reason to move forward. And that's exactly why I appreciate the execution so much. Post Forks Richie is a completely different beast.
Sorry, you're wearing a suit?
Yeah, I wear suits now.
I'll be honest, when I think about how good Forks is as an episode, it's biased very heavily on what comes exactly after it. What Richie becomes as a result of this episode is something I can only ever love, and every instance of payoff makes me more appreciative of the narrative decision of Forks as an episode. By leaving his old self behind, Richie evolves into something that doesn't just benefit the restaurant and the fine dining purpose, he actually becomes a better person. He's more receptive to everyone around him and doesn't actively stand in the way of their goals, and manages to pick up the slack when the kitchen is struggling. It's some combination of him being a better person overall and his newfound utility that completely flips the bearing on my liking of his character. It's such a realistic portrayal of someone learning how they can contribute and then understanding their role as a small piece of a bigger puzzle. Like, look, at this part at the end of the episode when Richie is feeling down on himself, he's still happy enough to wipe Forks down because he understands how his work contributes to the running of the restaurant, how serious everyone else is at the restaurant about their craft, and how beautiful the final product really comes out. I have to say, the bear shows us exactly how you should redeem a character. It creates a complex and troubled character full of untapped potential that's stuck in the past, and then resolves his problems through a productive and positive lens. Richie as a person isn't suddenly much different to how he was before the episode. What changed was his misunderstandings being cleared and his direction. His purpose.